In 1987, a pod in space ripened, then burst. The G.I. Joe movie was like a showering of spores down onto the earth, mutating the imagination of young boys everywhere and reducing us all to mindless beasts. Well, not all of us. I want to talk about Cobra La. The first thing I want to do is send out a message to people who reject Cobra La or didn't like it at the time. I finally understand that line of thinking. I understand why you feel that way. I've been reading the old comics. I started at number 1 and I'm around 40 or so right now. And in those comics, it is very, very military centric, which of course, yeah, it's G.I. Joe. But I mean, the way they speak, their actions, their missions, everything is just very, very hard military, hard-lined military. They have code words for everything, and they're very efficient at speaking. They're very efficient in their actions, in their in their battles and things, and it has a definite feel to it. So I understand. All of a sudden, you start bringing monsters and giant insects into it in this civilization that's been around forever that no one knew about. Yeah, I see how that really kind of breaks up, your image of GI Joe, and I get it. That makes a lot of sense now to me. I never understood it because I always really loved Cobra La. So as an adult, hearing that there's a whole sect of people that really have a problem with Cobra La. I never knew that. And when I first got into classified and collecting again, I didn't understand it. So but over time, over this past year and a half or so that I've been collecting and reading up on G.I. Joe and kind of going through the lore and everything, I understand, why you feel that way. I also have some issues with certain things. I don't like that they changed Cobra Commander's backstory, but 100%. In Cobra La, he was a scientist, and he's not even necessarily human. He looks, his skin's kind of blue, and he's got things growing on him and stuff. And he's a member of this other race, Cobra La. They're a species. A spore blows up in his face, and it mutates him, and that's why he wears the mask. So my whole life, I thought that's how Cobra Commander was made. I thought that was his backstory. And now I'm going back and seeing, no, that's not true at all. He was a used car salesman who created this pyramid scheme that ended up funding Cobra so he could build up this organization that he had in mind. And he was a human being, and he wasn't a member of Cobra La at all. So I feel kind of duped that I went this long without understanding that that's not who Cobra Commander is. So I agree with you on that. And to that same point, I also think that it's really dumb that the idea of creating Serpentor was planted in Dr. Mindbender with a psychic motivator. Psychic motivator is a very cool term. I like the sound of that, but just taking credit for his idea. Oh, I gave you that. That's kind of dumb. But to give you a little backstory about why Cobra La came into existence, when the team was tasked with making an animated movie for G.I. Joe, one of the producers kind of felt, we might not want to make a movie about war or terrorism. And this is 1987. The world was a different place. It's hard to imagine the climate back then. I mean, in 1987, I was a kid. I mean, I remember being a kid, but what the hell do I know about what was going on in the news and just the general tone of things? In 2025, the world is, we all know, has become kind of more sensitive place to live. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. But it was different in 1987. So it's hard to kind of put yourself in the mindset of what was okay and what was not okay. To me, thinking back, a movie about G.I. Joe, going, having a war or something doesn't really sound like a problem. I mean, the cartoons were all kind of always about that anyways. They're all shooting guns, but they're laser guns, and most of the time no one ever really dies. So it always kind of seemed harmless, but the producer at the time felt war and terrorism is not a good thing to make a movie about right now. And yes, G.I. Joe is, of course, a military-themed toy line. But as a kid, I mean, I just thought of it as good guys versus bad guys. And I never really thought of G.I. Joe as being based on reality. That's another thing. The movie would have never been the USA versus Russia, and we watch an animated war. It's mainly about eccentric characters, some straight-laced people too, but, everybody's fighting ninjas and robots, and there's a man with a metal face, and there's trouble bubbles and pogos. It was never that realistic to begin with. But hey, if you're making a movie and you're trying to make everyone happy, I could see how deciding to leave the war element and the terrorism element out of things could have been, a good idea, or at least understandable. And anyways, one of the producers on the movie was into sci-fi, and he wanted to do a sci-fi theme, so that's why Cobra La was kind of built into the plot of this movie. And just a little backstory on Cobra La. Cobra La is a 40,000-year-old civilization that ruled the earth, and then humanity became something, and they grew into power. So Cobra La kind of went into the Himalayan mountains, and they went underground and rode out an ice age, and they're just waiting for their time again. And I don't need to sit and recap this whole movie. Everybody that's watching this, I'm sure, has seen the movie. But if you're a fan of G.I. Joe and you're a fan of monsters and mutants and aliens, I mean, this was perfect. And I loved it. My brothers and I, and probably friends and things too, we worked in quotes from that movie into just our day-to-day life. Like nowadays, you might say a Seinfeld quote here and there when something happens that reminds you of an episode of Seinfeld. We did that with Cobra La. I would tackle my brother, and I would get him in a headlock, and I'd say, "The last sound you will hear is the cracking of your vertebrae, one by one." And he loved it. Before I went pee, I'd stand in front of the toilet, and I'd say, "When the pods ripen, they will burst." And then you pee. Cobra La was part of life. All right, let's talk about some of the characters. Pythona. The opening sequence of the G.I. Joe movie is incredible. Pythona comes in and slips into the Terradrome, infiltrates it with complete perfection. An eye on a tentacle rises out of the water, then this whole pod thing comes up. She steps out. The thing dissolves and goes back into the water. That's how we learn about Pythona. That's how the first thing that we see. She approaches an electrified fence. She pulls out this four-headed snake thing and throws it on the fence. The snakes chomp through it, cutting a hole so she can get through. She takes out a guard, which raises some alarms, and then goes up to a real thick steel wall. Her fingernails extend, digs them into the wall and slices through it, so now she can get in through there. She pulls out this toad skin pad with tentacles, and it blows off this weird gas in their face. Then she pulls out this clam, which shoots out these strips of something that wrap people up. Another guy tackles her. She puts her hands on his face and just cooks his face through his mask. He's screaming. She throws a face hugger on another guy. She skates through these doors that are all closing at different angles. She throws these bombs off to the side. Serpentor's chariot starts firing these spiky needle things at her. She rolls out of the way and dodges all them. And then Serpentor tries to escape by sinking into the floor, and she dives in and catches up to him, which is why she's there to talk to him. That's how you do it. Start the movie with an awesome character who does 10 badass things in a row. And then she takes off her hood, and we see this is Pythona.
When the pods ripen, they will burst.
Okay, how about the Royal Guard? In the movie, they made these like kind of real insect-y sounds. So I always thought they were insect. people, basically. I mean, why not? There's giant insects and stuff all around. This is a very weird environment. But there's an Energon comic book storyline that's going on right now, and Cobra is involved in that, which I'm going to kind of talk about here and there too. And in that comic, those are masks. They take their masks off, and they are people underneath. They're humanoid. They look like they did in Cobra. They got like purple skin and kind of weird things growing on their body, but they're people under there. They have names: Dracula, Acronus, Bola. There's a few of them. Those are the three that are in the comics right now. I'm sure we're going to kind of learn a little bit more about them as time goes on. They're not mindless drones like I thought, or maybe they were in the cartoon, but they're kind of being reinvented now as people. So could be either way. And their armor, their suit, is like a living thing. They call it their second skin. And when their second skin dies, if they're in an environment that's unforgiving, such as, outer space where there's no air or the temperature, isn't going to work for them, if their armor or their second skin dies, they'll die too. Okay, Nemesis Immortal. He's the big Mack truck with wings. In the movie, he fights Sergeant Slaughter. In the comics, he is on a mission with Cobra Commander. Not a whole lot to say about him. He's just kind of a big bodyguard, henchman type character. He doesn't speak. He just kind of, screeches. And he's just the big guy you send out to go collect or do some damage. I think he's probably the most popular character in Cobra. Not to me, but a lot of people do like him. And his name was Nemesis Enforcer at one point, and then some licensing thing happened, and now he's Nemesis Immortal. All right, Golobulus. He, like many other members of Cobra, they replace and enhance their body parts as time goes on. The only real thing left of him that is him, an original part, is his brain and his nervous system. I mean, that's awesome. So that explains why, like, one arm is green. If it's rotting or getting old, he will replace it. That's how he's managed to avoid aging. He just replaces body parts, and he's got a snake body. Doesn't mean he was born with a snake body, but at some point his legs were failing him, and there was a snake around that size, and that worked for him. So that's why he looks kind of mixed matched in things. He replaces his body parts as he needs them. He is the king of Cobra. And I gotta say, as a kid, he was just the ultimate for me. Crab shell armor, snake body, the weird yellow eye, the voice of Burgess Meredith. He was awesome. Awesome. That time worm thing or on that little stick, that loved it. I loved all of it. It just blew my mind.
The last thing you will hear is the cracking of your vertebrae, one by one.
And then the actual setting of Cobra. I mean, we had those beetles that made like a red carpet, those sick airships that make this crazy shriek when you pull on these tendrils from inside, and then it opens some weird door that it goes into, the bridge that turns into that giant insect, the clam that they put Cobra Commander in, the magnificent spores. That stuff rocked me. I mean, it sank into me. When I got older, I went on to become like a pretty good drawer, and I would draw stuff like that. I drew a lot of monsters and just weird, disoriented creatures and things. I was inspired by a lot of stuff at that age. In ninth grade, I mean, hey, like I like Nine Inch Nails and metal, and there was movies and things around that certainly sank into me too. But there's a piece of me that came from Cobra. And in revisiting G.I. Joe as an adult, it's really fun, but it's also kind of difficult to remember exactly how things were and how I took it in as a kid. I mean, we're talking about like almost 40 years ago, and you're a kid. I mean, I remember some stuff. I remember a lot of stuff. Some of it's also just kind of guesswork, kind of piecing things together from what other people remember too. And, you know, just trying to put yourself in your headspace from that era and that age. It's difficult. Fun, but who knows, you know, what you actually remember correctly and what's been kind of changed over the years in your mind. But it is really fun revisiting G.I. Joe. All right, and then here is a vehicle that was supposed to be produced when the Cobra La movie came out that just never happened. The Insecticycle. It's like a motorcycle that's shaped like a grub, and it has this crustacean shell that swings down and covers over where the driver sits. And the driver was molded and cast and produced and ready to go, but the Insecticycle was canceled, so they put the driver with the anti-gravity pod, and he worked under Destro. But Nullifier was originally intended to be another member of Cobra La. So he's kind of the Cobra La secret agent that's been around this whole time. Now, Cobra La has returned. And we are getting to explore the environment and the world and the lore of Cobra La right now, because they are a part of this Energon universe comic series. That's that's going on right now. Specifically, Cobra Commander had a mini series. Cobra La was definitely a part of that. And then there's another comic called Void Rivals that Pythona and her Royal Guard and a couple people that work underneath her are involved in as well. And there's a lot going on in the Energon universe. The Transformers are like a real big part of it. There's aliens and other species and space travel, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But Cobra La is in the mix. So what's going on, and this is going to be the Cobra Commander miniseries that I'm talking about here. And it came out last year. I think you can buy it now. It's a 5 comic book series, but they make like a soft cover book for like $15 on Amazon or eBay or something that you can find. But anyways, in Cobra La, there is civil unrest. The people have been secluded in this area for a very long time. They are running out of resources. And so everybody's kind of on edge anyways. And then someone has captured a transformer. So they're holding a transformer as prisoner, and the people are aware of that too. So everybody's like, you know, really freaking out and really on edge. And by the way, you know, Transformers, they are very high tech. They're robots. They're made of metal. They have weird properties. They're from space. And Cobra La is kind of the opposite of that. They worship the organic. They don't like anything that's manufactured, or they don't like metal, and they don't like just foreign substances. So a transformer being in their world really freaks them out. But they're aware that he has some sort of an energy in him that they are all kind of trying to harvest and learn about. And scientists are trying to extract this, and they're getting killed or they're dying. The transformer doesn't want to talk to anybody or, you know, explain, you know, this energy or why he's there or anything. But Cobra Commander apparently has some sort of a connection with him, and Cobra Commander is able to interrogate him and extract this energy without harm. He discovers that this can be weaponized. He goes to King Golobulus and asks, you know, can I leave and go search out and find more of this energon? And I'll bring it back to Cobra La, and that'll make us stronger and be able to, you know, take on the world. And Golobulus allows it. And there's also a really great part in the comic where all the scientists are in their lab, and it's big doors on it, and a mob outside is trying to break in. You know, this is where the transformer is, and they're upset, like I said. And the scientists are all freaking out. And you see a scientist guy who, he's got the purple skin. He's got the stuff growing on him. He looks just like Cobra Commander did in the movie when they showed his flashback. And he starts screaming, "Retreat, retreat." And you're like, okay, that's Cobra Commander. And then, boom, the guy gets shot through the head. And the next panel, it shows Cobra Commander kind of wearing a different outfit. And he's like, "No one retreats." And that's cool. It's a little bit of redemption for Cobra Commander from, being such a, wuss in the movies, always, running and screaming and retreating and blaming everyone. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then, so anyways, Cobra Commander, goes out into the world to find Energon, and he has to bring this bodyguard with him. It just looks like a regular guy who is, there to kind of keep an eye on Cobra Commander, make sure he does what he's supposed to do and not do anything he's not supposed to do. That guy later turns out to be Nemesis Immortal in a disguise, which is a pretty cool reveal. Cobra Commander's got some sort of tracker that, helps him find the source of this energon. And the Dreadnoks are involved too. Cobra Commander meets the Dreadnoks for the first time. So this is kind of like they're resetting the timeline or something. If you were to go and, kind of read these comics, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's some differences. Baroness is on the G.I. Joe team right now. Everybody's kind of, Cobra hasn't really become Cobra yet. Cobra Commander and Destro meet for the first time. So yeah, it's like a prequel, but probably, like in the realm of Marvel Comics where it's a different timeline or different continuity or something along those lines. Cobra Commander gains control of the Energon and then contacts Destro for the first time. He's heard about this arms dealer that maybe he could work with. The two of them meet and form an alliance to, infuse Destro's weapons with Energon and just make some unstoppable weapons. And then meanwhile, Pythona gets permission from Golobulus to go look into what's going, like where the Transformer came from. So she's kind of out in space with a couple royal guards, and she has like a right-hand man named Viperia. And it's just fun to see Cobra La again. It's cool seeing it in comic form because all their stuff's organic. So, Pythona's laying in this hammock at one point, and the hammock looks like a spider web, and there's weird plants. It's just neat seeing all this stuff again. Just in closing, I mean, if you don't like Cobra La or you never liked Cobra La, that's cool. I get it. If you're on the fence or you don't hate it as much as you used to, it might be time to take another look at it. Maybe give it a shot. And by the way, this certainly isn't like the first weird thing that happened in G.I. Joe. I mean, Zartan, like he's like a magician, like with his illusions, he changes the appearance of things. And by the way, I love Zartan, but that's weird. A brainwave scanner that projects your thoughts on a screen in real time. Twins that feel each other's pain. A man that wears a mask that's made of metal, but it also like flexes with his lips when he talks and moves with the muscles on his face. I mean, these are all weird things, and I'm not trashing any of them. I love all of them. But I'm just saying, hey, that's what makes G.I. Joe fun, is all this weird stuff. Cobra La is definitely weird, but there's lots of other weird stuff. And hey, give Cobra La another chance. I don't know, man. Cobra La meant a lot to me as a kid. It's really cool seeing it come back again, and I love it. I'm on board with this comic story that's going on right now. And Nemesis Immortal figure I thought came out pretty good. I wish the wingspan was a little bigger, but whatever, it's fine. I really hope that they make everybody else. I would love the troop build, the Royal Guard. I want to see Pythona, and I really want to see Golobulus. I want a big, expensive Golobulus to just be the centerpiece of my whole collection. All right, guys. Hey, thanks again for watching. Appreciate everything. G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe.